Hey there, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another Alchemi-Culture episode. In this episode, I'm talking with my very dear friend Ahmed about the scholarly translations from Arabic of the Emerald Tablet. And for those of you who know about my work with alchemy, so much of my work is derived from the Emerald Tablet. In fact, presiding over my laboratory just right over here, I have a major translation of it that I read every single day when I come into the lab. The very first thing that I do is that. The very last thing that I do before I leave the lab is read the Emerald Tablet. It has been a source of inspiration for me from the very beginning of me studying alchemy. The closest that I've ever personally been able to get linguistically to it is the Latin translations. And today, Ahmed and I will be actually going over modern day English from Arabic translations, because the Arabic translations are the oldest remnants that we actually have. As we know, there were ancient Egyptian translations and Greek translations that existed in the libraries of Alexandria. Those are now lost to history, whether they were burned or kept in private libraries and haven't resurfaced or whatever, we don't know. But the very original form, which was said to have been casted in actual emerald in bas relief, meaning that the emerald was cast around the letters in wax or something else, would have been amazing. And we actually do have reports of this being on display in ancient Egypt, in Alexandria, during the time of Alexander the Great. And since that time, there have only been various translations. And like I said, the oldest surviving translations today are in Arabic, and then they got translated into Latin, from there into Spanish, into French, into English, etc. And all of the different translations tend to either add some elements or remove some elements. And today we'll be performing a little bit of a comparative and a linguistic translation to this. So Ahmed, thank you so much for joining us today, brother. It's been such a wonder and so much fun working with you over the past couple of weeks since you reached out to me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm very honored to help out with this. I think what we're doing here is very important and may help people all around the world, really.
I do too, actually. And like you and I were talking about before we started recording, was that at one time, approximately, 500 AD to, about 900, even 1000 AD, Arabic alchemy was the big thing. In fact, the entire Arabic world at that point was excelling in astronomy, in mathematics, in all scholastic sciences. In fact, if it wasn't for that Arabic science coming up through Morocco and into southern Spain, because of the Moorish influence there would be no Renaissance that happened in Europe the way that people think about it today, that the Western cultures, look back to and say, oh, this is so great. It was specifically because of the preservation and the adaptation and the acceleration that the Arabic world had given to us at that time, that Europeans were even able to get onto the bandwagon of mathematics and astronomy. So I think that this is a beautiful opportunity, because we have the opportunity to reconcile history in the modern day, where all of our talents, all of our achievements from history can make their way into the social fabric, regardless of where we're from. And we can understand and appreciate the contributions of every culture to the heritage of what we have all inherited today. So I think I'm super excited about this talk, personally.
Yeah, and just to give the listeners a few examples, algorithms, which we hear all over the place today,
Yes.
comes from the name of a mathematician. His last name was Al-Khwarizmi, Algebra comes from Al-Jabr. I think it's Jabr.
Yeah.
Jabr bin Hayyan. And there are a lot of examples of that too. If we look up in the sky, a lot of stars are named Arabic names.
Yes.
So yeah, it brings me joy to remember that we kind of passed the torch. We held it.
Yeah.
We lit it stronger and we kept it going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I think that it's personally very, very cool. Especially today in the Western world and in the United States, there is a lot of prejudice against Arabic nations and Arabic people, looking at them as lesser educated or third world or all these other things. When, when the entire basis of our civilization as we know it actually got inherited as Europeans, got inherited through the sciences from the Arabic world. They passed on from Egypt and Mesopotamia before them, Mesopotamia to Egypt, Egypt to Greece, Greece to the Arabs, Arabs to the Europeans. And so I think that it's super cool. It brings everything together in a way that it's like, let's get over our judgments and get back to integrating the knowledge that is, it's universal and it's timeless. So anyway, I'm very passionate about that topic, as you can tell. And for our listeners, you know, even our word alcohol for like alcohol comes from alcohol.
Yes,
which,
alcohol. Yeah.
yeah, which would be basically a spirit, right? Isn't that what it means, like the spirit?
Alcohol.
How would you translate that?
I wouldn't. I see it as a word by itself that would represent alcohol, actually.
Oh,
and
okay.
maybe because I haven't dug into the etymology or too much, but when I remember looking into this for a while, and it was like the purification of, or like the distillation of wine. That's
Yeah.
where the word came from, you know. So we can check real quick, or maybe in a little bit, where the root of that word comes from. You know?
Yeah, that would,
Interestingly, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say that would be a really fascinating thing because, you know, it was Jabir ibn Hayyan, who in the West we just call Geber or Jaber sometimes. He was the person who created the sulfur mercury theory that later Paracelsus elaborated on to sulfur mercury salt theory. And as a result of that, the alcohol was technically like part of the mercury of all of the works that had been created up until that point. So I think that you find that word over and over and over and over in the Arabic alchemical work.
Yeah.
While you're looking that up.
Oh. Yeah, they're it's when like this may take longer, but for now, what they're saying, it comes from the root chem, which is
black.
No, I don't think. Well, I'm not really sure why they put chem here because it could be numbers, but it says it's a fluid, colorless, with a specific fragrance, and comes from fermenting sugar, and is incorporated in making spirits. You know, ruh is spirit. And that's why I take a pause with kahol, because I wanted to make sure if that root is related to ruh. Ruh, which means also go, by the way, which means also wind, you know, and spirit. So spirit and going, if they're etherically going, you know, if you leave a place, your spirit leaves that place. They all come from the same word. But I think kahul has the jabr kah sound because I've seen it in like the books that recommended that I read. This kah root or morpheme, I guess, is in a lot of words that he uses. And I'm really interested. I hope like at one point I will find out why he would add that sound into the words. Because I think there's a story there, by the way.
Yeah, which is the character that you're talking about. Again, forgive my knowledge of my lack of knowledge of Arabic in a deep etymological or linguistic sense, but is that root more or less the KH kind of sound? Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, you know, I had heard, and maybe you have an opinion on this, I've heard somewhere through research that the way that old Arabic communities would have referred to Egypt, like pre-Arabic Egypt, was called Al-Khaim or Al-Khaim. Do you know anything about that?
Um, I've heard that too. It means like black soil, I
Yeah,
think.
black soil or black land.
Yeah, which could be an Egyptian word, like an ancient Egyptian word, because it's not in the like it's not used anymore in
Yeah.
modern Arabic. When I try to look it up, and looking things up online is not the same as looking them up with an older
Yeah.
Merjan, which is like how Arabic is, I think, has this thing going for it that it's really easy to see the root of each word because you add prefixes and suffixes and infixes, and you can like inflect it to mean many or little. So it's really easy to find that root, and that's the way they form their dictionaries or mergents, I guess. So when I looked at them online, Al-Khaim was not really. There's some missing history. I would much rather dig deeper, and I hope I'll get some older mergems very soon. Actually, that could help with this stuff. But for now, it could be a borrowed word from Egypt, if I had to guess, because um, in my search, it would just refer to Egypt actually as a place or as a substance of the soul.
Cool. That is really cool.
Yeah.
So, you actually reached out to me a couple, I want to say weeks, but it may have even been months ago now. And you said, hey, I've been reading the Emerald Tablet and I've actually got a translation of it. Is it okay with you if I pull that up?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, perfect. I'm just going to share my screen so that people can see what I'm looking at over here. Let me pull this up. Okay, perfect. So this is just a Google document. Arabic reads from right to left. So we're looking from here to here. And this is the actual initial translation. This is basically the way that it would have been shown up to people 600 AD. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is the oldest translation I could find.
Yep, exactly. And this eventually got translated into Latin, which when we start looking at this and comparing it, I want to pull up the Latin translations because I think this is really fascinating to show how the interpreters changed it. And, this is something that's really important because today, a huge part of my work is to read Paracelsus' work, who was a Swiss alchemist who was speaking Middle High German and writing in Middle German, which are, there's all these different successions of, and based on class, what type of language they were reading and writing and speaking and stuff. And so people like Arthur Edward Waite, he would take translations of Paracelsus' work and translate it because he felt that the spiritual aspects were more important. And so he turned like all of this laboratory terminology and stuff in his translations to be spiritual stuff that moved away from laboratory work. And so when people read most of Paracelsus' work today, they're reading stuff that is interpreted by somebody who doesn't know the original context very thoroughly.
Mm.
And I think that same type of spirit happened with many translations from Arabic to Latin, because for the most part, they were Christian monks who were performing these translations. And especially right around the 1000 year mark, 900 AD to about 1300 AD, the standard individual didn't even know how to read and write their own native language, let alone to be able to translate. The only places that were real scholarly places of learning and of linguistics and stuff within European societies at that time were monasteries. And so you have monks, again, not knowing the actual alchemical work, translating things from a scholastic perspective, and in so doing, possibly missing out on some really important details. So that's what I think is really cool, to be able to go back to this Arabic bit. So how would you pronounce this very first stanza right here?
حق لا شك فيه صحيح.
Which in your translation means something like truth, undoubtedly correct, right?
Yes, yes. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
The first word means truth.
Right
Yeah. La means un or no. It's a negative. Shek, which means doubt. Fi means in it. Sahih means correct. But if you can see Sahih and oh, my bad. I thought Sahih and Haq would share similar things, but this is good because Sahih means correct more than Haq means true. In Arabic, you can say Haq means correct too, but since we have both words, I think it does show the difference that it's about truth in the beginning and correctness in the end,
Okay. And like no doubt, truth,
Yeah.
no doubt, with correct or with correctness.
Yeah. And the truth, fihi, the fourth word, this word means in it. So in the truth, we see correctness undoubtedly. That would be a way to literally translate that sentence.
Okay. So yeah, so that needs to be kind of taken into consideration with this last word here. So, realistically, if I'm to share, did that change the screen at all? Can you see a different translation now?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just zoom in on this. So this is the Emerald Tablet Latin translation by Frederick Cheslan. And he says, Verum sine mendacio certum e verissimum, which means, now there's four things. Okay, so first we started with three things. Now, which would be truth, like no doubt or undoubtedly, and with certainty or with correctness. Now we have in Latin, verum, which means true, sine mendacio, which means without lie or without deceit. Certum means certain, and then et verissimum. This is verissimum is like a term that is just like verum, but anytime you add isi or isim to a Latin word, it means very much. So this would mean literally very true or like ultra true. So truth or in truth, without deceit or without lie, certain and very true or most true. The most true that you can get would be another way of translating that. That's what we get with that very first line. So I think that it's interesting that just right from the very beginning, we're keeping with the same feeling, but we're starting to look at things that already aren't there. It never says verissimum in the Arabic, basically. It doesn't say most true. It just says truth, undoubtedly, or definitely certain. Yeah, and then it's correct with great truth or into great truth.
That's interesting. Why would, like in Latin, why would you add that last phrase in it? Like, what if you were? Do you think it's the spiritual / religious influence that's trying to?
Yes.
Okay.
And let me tell you
more holy.
that by the time this translation had begun to be very popular, Frederick Cheslan, there was already the concept of Christian Kabbalah with a C, Cabbala. So as you may know, Kabbalah, Kabbalah, Kabbalah was Jewish Kabbalah just for clergy members who were like rabbi in particular, who were 40 years old or older, who already had a family, had already been practicing and had been a rabbi for like 20 plus years. Now they can practice Kabbalah. That is the way that has passed on in the Jewish tradition. And by the time that alchemy and these other sciences had reached southern Spain, the Jewish influence had already influenced mysticism so much, and also through gypsy mysticism, through Romanian Jewish lines, that mysticism was tied into these secrets that the Jews had held. And so Kabbalah became very, very important for people who were studying anything that was considered to be mystical at that time. And alchemy was definitely one of the most mystical things around. And so they couldn't, in good faith, maintain that there was Jewish, actively modern Jewish elements in their mysticism, because that would have gone against the rules at that time of Christianity. And so what they did was they drew upon their Judaic Christian roots, meaning that Christianity sprang out of Judaism, kind of in a similar way that Islam sprang out of Judaism. It sprang out of Abraham, or Abrahim, right? Ibrahim. So they drew on that, but then they Christianized it. And when they Christianized it, they changed the spelling from Kabbalah, K-A-B-B-A-L-A-H, to C-A-B-A-L-A, Kabbalah. And it started to take on this very Christian connotation, where anybody practicing good healing magic within the confines of what was okay within Christianity, or any of the mystical traditions that were scholastic at the time, they had to be practicing that. And within that philosophy, there are 4 worlds. And these 4 worlds would be Atzilut, Braya, Yetzira, and Asaya. These would be the 4 worlds that pertain to everything. And so within this translation in Latin, they're basically telling us that in all 4 of these Kabbalistic worlds, in the world that belongs to Earth, or Asaya, in the world that belongs to the astral plane, which they call the foundation, Yetzira, in the world that belongs to the causal plane, or what they would have called maybe the mental plane, even 100 years ago, they would call this Braya. And then finally, Atzilut, the world of spiritual emanation that only God or Allah or Yehovah exists in. This would be the spiritual plane. And so this is where they were most likely, from an etymological standpoint, coming from, and why they made it like this, because they're setting the precedent that this is true. This pattern that we're about to experience in the Emerald Tablet applies to every single one of these planes. And so where the Christians adapted this Kabbalistic philosophy, the Arabs never did.
Interesting. Okay.
So let's see, just really first, yeah, so the next 3 lines, this line, this line, and this line, as far as I understand it, are all really like one big phrase. Is that true in the Arabic translation?
I think so. Yeah.
Really?
Well, the last line you pointed to is talking about the sun and the moon, and after we're talking about the wind and the earth. So
it's really just these 2 lines then, that which, okay, so go ahead and give us what these say in Arabic, and then break it out in as good of a translation as you can provide.
Okay. إن الأعلى من الأسفل والأسفل من الأعلى. This line means what is in the above is from the below, and what is the below is from the above. And this from that I'm saying could be relational as much as it could be like this came from this, you know. Um, yeah, it's just clear and simple like that. I remember when I read the Emerald Tablet in English, the translation I had, it said like as above, so below, and
Yeah.
as below, so above. And when I read the Arabic version, I was like, that's not like, there's a little bit of a difference here. It's more like a matter of fact, you know? It's like what you see above is from the below, and what you see below is from the above, you know?
Which is interesting because that literally shows like a causation, like one begat the other in a way, and then the other also begat the other. So it's like it's almost relaying this is both the chicken and the egg. The chicken gave the egg and the egg gave the chicken.
Yes, yeah. And the third line عمل العجائب من واحد كما كانت الأشياء كلها من واحد بتدبير واحد. This means I'm gonna do word by word. First, عمل means work. That's like the simplest translation. This is what comes to mind immediately.
Yeah.
عجائب means wonders. Min means from. Wahid is one. Kama is also or such. Yeah, also works. Kanat, which الأشياء كلها من واحد. This means okay. Kama means just like. Kanat. الأشياء means just like the things, all of the things with كلها after come from one meditation or one بتدبير. I remember when I was translating it, I looked it up because it's not like planning or scheming. It's more like looking at the full picture while also looking at the details, like really thinking about it. So maybe meditation would work here.
Okay.
You know, in one, we can say one meditation, and the one here could mean the number one, or it could mean unity. You know,
and
that's
symbolized by this letter here, right?
واحد, yes.
We see that also right there.
Well, that's the first letter of that word. Wahid and Ahad and are the word for one. Yeah. So Wahid means one, and could also mean unity. Like كلنا واحد means we're all one. So in this case, it would mean unity. We're all the same thing.
Okay.
But Wahid means also the only thing. You know, like one thing. So, yeah.
So again, we start off with work, and
yes,
we basically, I forget what this phrase was right here.
Okay, wonders from. So work, wonders from. So if we're gonna, I'm gonna try to do a sentence by sentence in this sentence because it's like, it has two.
Together, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's what you meant when you asked me earlier if they're jumbled together or not.
Right.
This one has a few ideas in it. So عمل العجائب من واحد. Okay, that's the first thing. The first four words, which is the work of wonders are from one.
Okay.
Just like things, all things were from one, with one meditation. So we can see it as three ideas here.
Yes.
The work of wonders from one, or unity. All things are from one, or unity. Both of them with one meditation. You know, or you could say that the things are from one meditation, linking the first matter with the one thing, you know, one mind. Yeah.
Now, in your experience or anything that you've ever heard or read, is it ever stated that Allah is this one thing or this?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
if we were to translate this possibly from an Islamic context, like a religious context, would it also be able to say that the wondrous work of Allah?
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Okay. That's really fascinating to me, actually, because as I'm looking at this, that seems to add a lot of spiritual connotation and spiritual meaning that would have also been necessary to be incorporated inside of the alchemical work, inside of the Arabic context. Just like later in the Christian era, they translated that as God, like the one thing, the thing that everything originates from, they would have said was, the Christian concept of God. And so that's the way that they ended up translating that concept or understanding it. The translation always said from one, which I'll talk about here in just one moment. In fact, let's just go ahead and take a look at this. In Latin, they say, quod est inferius et sicut quod est superius, et quod est superius et sicut quod est inferius, which, and then it goes on to say, ad perpetranda miracula reunius. So it goes on to say, which is all of what is actually succinctly just said within this line and this line right here is from here down in Latin. So they say, et sicur res omnes fuerunt ab uno meditatione unius, sic omnes res nate ab acuna re adaptatione, which this whole thing here means, quod est means that, you could even say that which is below is as that which is above, and that which is above is as that which is below. So it doesn't say that it came from, and I think that that's really important because the Arabic translation, as we just talked about, indicates that there is originality from one thing to the other. This just says these things are like. Sikut means like or as. So that which is below is that which is above, that which is above is that which is below. Ad perpetranda miracula reunius means for the perpetration, or literally for the happening, for the occurrence of the miracle of the one thing. Res is the Latin for thing, and rei would be the dative case, I believe, and unius, the one. So this means together the one thing. This means the miracle of the one thing. So where we start to see, like right here with no, it's right here, work miraculous, or work
wondrous works, or extraordinary works, or amazing things that happen. Yeah.
So that's what we're seeing here, miracula reunius. That's where they're getting that. And then they say here, and just as that one, just as all things, omnes means all, just as all things came from, so this is, or maybe you could also say originated, but fuerunt literally means like they, if I were to say they came from the house of Memor, that's the word that I would use for they came, fuerunt. So just as all things, or and as all things came from the one, and you can see that they specifically, they're constantly capitalizing the things that are really dealing with the one thing, meaning that it's like, it's very important. Then they say meditatione unius. This means through the meditation of one, would literally be that translation. Through the meditation of one, so do all things, or so all things are born from that one thing through adaptation. And so that we're already starting to see that there's not a perfect translation between the Arabic and the Latin, that in order to try and even get across the idea of what is being said from the Arabic translation to this Latin translation, they have to add a lot more ideas or change the expression of the ideas, because there's not the same, you can't transliterate something and have it mean the same thing. But we're still pretty much staying within the same ballpark so far. So
Yeah.
I think that this is good. I think that this is very interesting stuff. But again, that which is below is that which is above, that which is above is that which is below, for the performance or for the perpetration of the miracle of the one thing. And as all things come from one through the meditation of one, so all things are born from that one thing through adaptation. And if I were to actually translate this in modern language, I wouldn't use the transliteration of adaptation. I might use the term through evolution. That would probably be the more modernly accurate translation for adaptazione. It would be like through evolution. So very, very interesting so far.
Oh, and I wanted to add tadbir, which is the meditation, I think also adaptation. I think they added the last sentence to exemplify the tadbir, which is bitadbir wahid, the last two words in that sentence.
Right there.
Show that it's meditation, it's intention, and since it's these two things, it's adaptation or evolution. I think that's why they had to. But for me, seeing that word, I can see those three meanings in that word. That makes sense.
Yeah. Languages are kind of open that way. They are kind of open. They're very loose as long as the idea gets expressed. So yeah, I think that's very interesting. Now, this phrase, Ahmed, how would you translate this?
Abuhu Shams, Ummuhu al-Qamar. This means I would say his father is the sun and his mother is the moon. But it could be its father. But you see, like when I first read it, I would assume that it's a thing that had parents, right?
Yeah.
And since it had parents, and we're just using ha. So if it's female, we would say abuha instead of abuhu.
Okay.
You know? So abuhu shams, ummuhu al-qamar. His father is the sun, and his mother is the moon.
I think that that's actually important. Let's go with that, because if it was a female thing, it would have a different translation with the verb hu versus ha, right?
Yes.
So this indicates that the thing that they are making is male, but that it's definitely talking about something that is actually real. It's not just like an it actually has gender within the Arabic. Would you say that that's true? Yeah. Okay, now I think that is very, very, very important to think about, because by the time that we get to Latin, it tells us that first phrase is actually just this part that I have highlighted here. They say pater eius sol, which just means its father. This could also mean their father, but it wouldn't really, eius would be singular. So this would mean its father is the son. And in that way, even though Latin actually does have gender specific terms that it can use, this is very indeterminate. Its father is the son. And I think that that is a very interesting change. And then, I'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a second, but let's go ahead and translate this line then.
حملته الريح في بطنها غذته الأرض. So this one says the spirit or the wind carried it in its belly or stomach or womb, I guess.
Okay.
And the earth nursed him or fed him. حملته, the first word, could also mean impregnated, like the wind was pregnant by with this thing
Yeah.
in her stomach, you know. And yeah, I think the earth part is a little bit clearer, where like the earth is nursing him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in neither of these phrases here, are you seeing anything about the moon?
The moon, yeah.
Yeah.
His mother is the moon.
And
Is on
where
the first.
right there?
It's yep, yes.
Okay, so this would say his father is the sun, his mother the moon.
Yeah.
Or is the moon. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So yeah, so this whole phrase here would be this one right here. Pater eius es sol, mater eius es luna, meaning its father is the sun, its mother is the moon. You may say his father is the sun, his mother is the moon. You could read that like that in Latin, but it's not, it's so ambiguous whether this is he or she or his or hers, that a better translation today would just be its. And that's why I think that it's very important that we keep with this he/she, because technically what they would have been talking about is the creation of the stone, which the philosopher's stone would be definitively masculine because it's made from gold. And that's what I think is really important to talk about here. And then this line, which you had, which is very, very similar, portavit illud ventus in ventre suo. So portare would be the Latin verb for to carry. So this would mean it carried itself in the wind within itself, or the wind carried within itself this thing or it. And then nutrix literally means wet nurse. So that's like the nurse. So its nurse would be nutrix eius, terra est. Terra means earth. So its wet nurse is the earth, would be the way that would be translated. So pretty much this line is like, they're really, really close. They say almost exactly the same thing.
Okay. This one is father of talismans, keeper of wonders, full in power, or complete in power. Or yeah, complete is better.
Okay.
In power or might. I think power is more accurate though.
And in your opinion, is that the finality of the thought, or is it elaborated upon more in this phrase right here?
I think when I read it, they were separate, and I took it as this is the power is the finality of the thought.
Okay.
But then I remember when I read the line after it, I was like, well, what does this, like, it felt like it's all of the sudden. So it got me thinking maybe it was related to the one above it, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe let's just explore that. What does this phrase actually say, and what would you say that means?
Okay. Fire became earth, separate the earth from the fire.
Okay.
And I think they use articles in the last two words of fire and earth, but they don't in the first two.
Yeah,
and
you
this
can
could
kind of
serve.
see that because there's an article, right? Those first two characters would be the article, right?
Yeah.
For
one could, yeah, and earth too. Arda and ard. So the third word and the fifth one. One of them has the article and one doesn't.
Yeah.
And you could see it in two ways. The first way would be like, oh, we're referring to the same thing, because like we already mentioned them, and then now we're using the articles, so we're talking about those two things. But you could also see it as the archetypical earth and fire, because now they have articles and before they didn't.
Right,
Right.
right. That I think that is actually a really important linguistic key into trying to ascertain and understand the context of the original document or the original translation. When there is an article versus no article, that definitely tells us that something could be archetypal to begin with, and then specific afterwards.
Yes, exactly.
So, all right, well, that is really cool. Do you have any other commentary that you would like to say about those lines, or any other thoughts?
Yeah, the line above it, I think I did use the articles. So like, father of the talismans, keeper of the wonders, perfect or complete in the power, instead of like father of talismans, keeper of wonders, complete in power. There's articles there,
So
so
it
that
is
could.
very specific then. The talismans, right?
Mhm.
That's very,
Or archetypical too,
yeah,
like the idea of those things,
yeah.
talismans, the wonders, and power, or all powers. That's the other thing. Al-Quwa could mean is actually more accurately more all powers, because you have Quwa, which is one power,
Yeah.
or one force, and Quwa, which is all of them. You know.
That's cool. So this one would say like all forces, all powers.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that seems to be actually pretty similar to what this says. So this would tell us, pater omnus telesmi totius mundi est hic, and then they say virtus eus integra est si fuerza fuerit in terram. So this would mean the father of all of the talismans of the entire world is this thing. That would be like the very transliteral thing. Another way of saying that in more modern English would be like, what we're viewing, or this thing, is the father of all the talismans in the whole world. So that's kind of what they're talking about. So I think that it's very interesting that we still have what in Latin is telesmi as talismans showing up also in the Latin translation, or in the Arabic translation, as talismans, the talismans. I think that that's very interesting. And then this,
Yeah, Talsamat is, I think talismans comes from Talsamat, which is like an Arabic word. It's a translated Arabic word. I think the source of it is Arabic.
okay.
Mm.
So then they say virtus eus integra est si versa fuerit in terram. Now this is something that maybe you did say it and I just didn't hear you, but it says this thing is, so fuerit would be like strength. Integra is like integrity. So its true strength, or its integral strength, is, or yeah, it's like eus would be its, virtus would be like true, and integrity, integra, es si versa. This is like versa, like when we say in English vice versa, which is a Latin term. This is that thing. So vice versa means and also the other thing. So we would say, and also its other strength is in the earth. So virtus eus integra est si versa fuerit in terram. If I had to like make a good modern translation into English for that, I would say this is where its integral strength originates from the earth, or it comes from the earth. Which we didn't see that actually in the Arabic version at all. There was no real mention of that. It basically tells us a little bit about this, then it kind of comes to a stop. And then after that, the next line that you translated was this one, which they also kind of elaborated on. So you said, let's actually go over this line right here again. No, this line right here.
Yeah,
this says,
yeah.
Fire
became, earth.
Fire became, and
yeah.
then separate earth from the fire.
Yeah, the earth from the fire. Yeah.
Okay, so here's what they tell us about this in the Latin is separabis terra mavigne, which means separate, or is specifically separabis means you separate. Separabis terra mavigne, subtile ab spiso, which means the subtle from the gross, or like the subtle from the dense would be another way of saying that. Suaviter magno cum genio. Suaviter means like very gently, very gently. Magno cum genio means with great ingenuity or with great finesse would be another way of saying that. And yeah, that's kind of interesting. So they're saying very similar things, but again, this in the Arabic, it's just separate the earth, or the fire became the earth, separate the earth, or fire became earth, separate the earth from the fire. And here what we're seeing is you separate earth from fire gently, gently would be right here, with great ingenuity, the subtle from the gross. So separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, gently, with great ingenuity, or with great genius. There would be something like that. Great ingenuity would be the best translation I could give. So again, they're changing the way that it came across from the actual Arabic. And I think that initial Arabic is very important because it talks archetypally to specific.
Yes. And also, I think, if I had to guess, I think they kind of interpreted a few lines and just reorganized them a little bit. Because what you're saying is, it comes like in the next two lines, actually. So I think they just joined these ideas and tried to make sense of them in a specific way.
Okay.
Or yeah.
So what would this line say then in particular in the Arabic?
This line, al-latif akram min al-ghalid, the subtle, and I did some digging on the subtle here. Delicate is more literal, is finer than the gross. Again, with these two words, finer could mean better or more prestigious, has more value, or even holier. So we can see which one they would pick if there's a spiritual interpreter doing it, right? If it's a monk who's doing it. Yeah. And then ghalid or gross could mean thick or heavy, I guess.
Okay.
Maybe dense. Too much in a small place,
Yeah.
Too much stuff in a small place. And then this line, برفق وحكم يصعد من الأرض إلى السماء وينزل إلى الأرض من السماء. Okay. برفق وحكم means with gentleness and wisdom. يصعد means climb or go up. There's no noun that's doing this, so I think it's the assumption is whatever that was doing everything before this keeps doing what we're doing right now. So the thing, so برفق وحكم يصعد الشيء, I guess, if we would add that, من الأرض, so he climbs from earth or the earth to the sky or heaven, the heaven. وينزل, which means go down, إلى الأرض من السماء, to the earth from the heaven or from the sky. So earth in both cases, or the earth with the article, comes before the heaven. And I'm not really sure if that has any significance.
So that's really interesting, the way that it's coming across, because I can see how you just gave us, especially this line right above the one that you just translated here, because that would be like the subtle, subtile auspicio would be a good Latin translation from that, like the subtle from the dense, or the subtle, or the thin from the thick, something like that. So I think that one, the way that they translated that in the Latin version may not be so off, but then this starts off kind of talking about that same thing, but then also bleeds right into the next line, whereas in the Latin translations, they break that into an entirely new paragraph, which they call a rubric. And so right here, see, this is magnum cum ingenio, with great ingenuity. And then they go into that phrase that you just translated last. This says, ascendit a terra in coelum, iterrumque descendit in terram, et recipit vim superiorum et inferiorum. This means most people will be able to see the English word ascend inside of here. So that's literally what it means. It ascends from earth to, or literally into heaven, where it then, and therefore descends into earth and receives both the above and the below.
Which again, this would be a line beneath what we just said, actually.
Oh, okay.
The above and the below. Yeah. So they could be connected. But again, like I found this text in this format, and I'm not really sure if that's the format, the original format, and
fair enough.
With Arabic, you could, sometimes they don't use commas or periods or whatever. They just put sentences after sentences, especially older texts, or sometimes they would just put lines between them. So the punctuation could be off sometimes.
Sure. And I bet you that just like there is in Latin, there's probably maybe even dozens of translations into the Arabic from the original version. It's very unlikely that there would just be a single Arabic translation that the entire Arabic world at one time was working with.
That's definitely true. I found a few, actually, and it seemed to me the most complete, because there were no it had like more concepts than any other one. There were no omissions. The one that Jabir bin Hayyan wrote down was shorter than this one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That would be really fun as a follow-up to get Jabir ibn Hayyan's formula or translation into English as well, just to see how it measures up, because there are some versions of the Latin that I see that are a little more condensed too, but like your own choice of this one, that Latin translation that I found seemed to be the most complete and make the most sense. So
that line, وفيه قوة الأعلى والأسفل, and in it has power of the above and the below.
Okay.
So I think that's why it connects. And again, I remember when I read this, something clicked in my mind that we're talking about the same thing. When I read the Emerald Tablets, an English translation of it, I thought we were talking about, like, the theme was the same, but the agent that we're working with is not. I didn't know that it could be the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the Arabic one, it made it very clear that no, we're still talking about the same thing. We're
because
just
there's
talking
not
about
a different noun. Like, it's still the same verbs and the same conjugation of that verb for the operator going all the way through.
Yes, precisely. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Should we do the next one?
Yeah, sure. Is this where we left off, or the one right underneath it?
Yeah, that's the yeah, this one.
Okay.
لأن معه نور الأنوار فلذلك تهرب منه الظلمة. Because it has the light of lights, therefore darkness or the darkness escapes from him.
Wow, really? Right after that
Mhm.
phrase. Okay, the Latin is not that much different. I like that translation, which never in any translation have I heard anything, the light of lights, which would be lux lucis, would be the way that you would say that in Latin. I've never heard that in any of these translations, and I really like that. I think that's really beautiful. So, the light of lights. Okay, so give me that translation that you have again for this.
Okay. Since he has the light of lights, therefore darkness escapes him.
Okay, and what would this line be?
And in him, power of the above and the below. That would
Okay,
be the little translation. Yeah.
okay, cool. So we do have pretty similar concepts here, as it ascends from earth to heaven, back from heaven to earth, and then it contains both the above and the below. So we're seeing that. Yeah, that next phrase that you have is interesting. We might have to explore another line in the Arabic to see where they got this from, but it
Mm.
says "Sic habebis gloriam totius mundi," which means and therefore, or and now, it contains the glory of the whole world, or the beauty of the whole world. And then it says ideo fugiet ate omnis obscuritas. All uh, all darkness would be omnis obscuritas. Fugiet literally means to fly, but it can also mean to escape.
Mm.
It can also mean to steal.
Mm.
But it's usually always used in the term like it flies, it leaves would be that translation. So all obscurity flees before it. All
Mm.
obscurity flees away from this thing would basically be a way of saying that.
Mm. I can see why that would be formed like this, because it's borrowing, like I think it's interpreted a level post translation, like there's extra work, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
because a few lines down we can see how it can defeat things and it can penetrate things. And
Uh-huh.
with the line we were speaking of, with the light of lights,
Uh-huh.
the tahrub means escape or flee, you know. So I can see why it would be structured that way in Latin too. No.
Okay. That's really cool to hear. I really, really, really love the poetry of the light of lights. I wish that
Yeah.
that would have made it in to the Latin translation somewhere, because I think that that is really cool, especially when you're talking about transmutation of things whose father is the sun, like we talked about
Mm.
initially. As a
Yeah.
man will ultimately become a father himself and live
Mm.
into and even surpass the capabilities of his father. If the thing that's being created is the sun, then what is being created is going to be presumably even a more potent star once it comes to fruition and grows as its own man, right? So
Yeah.
I think that that
Wow.
is a really cool concept, and the light of lights in my mind
Yeah.
really personifies that.
I actually have a question about this line.
Yeah.
The one with light of lights. What is darkness here? Like lack of light, or is it a different force that we're transmuting? Like, is it matter that has the potential of turning into light? Because like it seems like the light is running away from. Sorry, the darkness is running away from this light. So
Yeah.
is it a duality here, or are they actually two different things that we're trying, you know, follow
It's,
what I'm saying?
I mean, yeah. So realistically, interpreting this from an alchemical perspective, specifically from a laboratory alchemical perspective, the darkness fleeing from the light would literally mean, as it refers to earlier, that the thickness flees from the thin, or that the gross flees from the subtle, meaning that you literally are able to transmute those denser qualities into something that is very, very subtle and piercing and penetrating, which it actually goes on to talk a little bit more about this force later, because it says, you know, in English basically that this is the greatest force of all powers because it's able to penetrate all solid things and encompass or to surround all subtle things. And so that's kind of what they'd be talking about inside of the laboratory perspective, is that if we are talking about the philosopher's stone, for instance, then it can take a baser metal like lead that has little value and is dark and corresponds to Saturn, and it can transform it into the light of the sun that is not corruptible like gold. And on the spiritual level, I think that it's basically saying essentially the same thing, is that it takes all of the aspects that deride us away from Allah, that divide us away from God or from unity, and it dispels those things. It causes those forces to fly, while the thing that we inherently notice within would be the unity of all things, the source, the origination from Allah, God, unity. On the astral level with the emotions, I think the same thing, is that it dispels those denser emotions of lack of worthiness, the negative aspects of pride, the negative aspects of ego, the negative aspects of all of those aspects of us, and exalts the aspects of us that live in certainty, in confidence, in beauty, in joy, in happiness, those types of things. And then lastly, on the causal plane or in the mental plane, the dense thoughts like predation, war, trepidation, you know, fear, those types of things. And it replaces them with their polar opposite, because that's where the causal plane is in the plane of polar opposites of zeros and one, binary coding basically, and puts you into, you know, the feeling of, you know, justice, for instance, all of the benevolent qualities, all of what we would consider to be in the West, the virtues of existence.
Okay.
So that's the best interpretation that I would have for it based on my own experience with it. But again, it's an interpretation.
So the line beneath the one with the darkness and the light is the line above the one you're highlighting, the really short one.
Okay, yeah.
And it states power of powers, kind of like light of lights, right? قوة القوى. So the thing that empowers powers would be another way of looking at that.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
What gives powers its power? See?
Okay.
So, and then it defeats everything subtle, and enters in everything gross or heavy or dense.
Okay. Yeah, so far that seems to be very congruent with this. This says it gives a little bit of a slightly different translation, but it says haec est totus fortitudinis fortitudo fortis, which means basically like in this way, it is the most, fortitudinis would be like the greatest strength the strongest, this would mean like strongest strength of strength. So sometimes this gets related to in modern English as this is the greatest force of all powers. This is the greatest of all strengths, something like that. But literally means the strongest strength of strengths would be a literal translation. Quia vincet omnem rem subtilem omnemque solidam penetravit, which basically overcomes or like surrounds all subtle things. Subtilem is subtle, and rem would be one of the cases of res, which means things. So it overcomes all subtle things. Omnemque solidam penetravit, and penetrates every solid thing.
يغلب in that line does mean defeat or overcome, actually. I said overpower, but it could mean those two. Like if you are in a brawl and you defeat your opponent, you can use يغلب, غلبت, like if you're fighting somebody.
Yeah, that makes sense, because like you can overcome your opponent. That means that you defeat him, or overpower. So okay, I think that that's really cool. So I can see how they're getting that translation. Then we just have two more lines here. Let's just go ahead and finish that off in the Arabic and see what this looks like from your perspective there.
Okay. على تكوين العالم الأكبر تكون العمل. This means on the formation or creation of the largest or the most largest world, we formed the work. This does not, like, even in, for me in Arabic, this seems like there's something missing here. It could be that's two thoughts combined of like on forming the largest or the grandest world. We have formed the work. I could see it being interpreted as that.
Okay, but it's very elusive, right? It doesn't seem to make perfect sense. It's almost like two separate thoughts that you have to reach to try and understand the connection.
Yes, exactly. When I was doing the etymology of the words, al-akbar, al-alam al-akbar, which I said just now, the largest or the grandest. What I came up with is biggest was the most literal translation that I could find, because that I paused at that too, especially when I was trying to translate it. Does it just mean size, or is there another hidden meaning here, or what? So
that's cool. And
but
the last line then.
فهذا فخري ولذلك سميت هرميز المثلث بالحكمة. And this here is my pride, and that's why I am called Hermes thrice wise, or great, I guess. But hikmah means wisdom, the last word.
Okay, so that, technically, if you were to translate that literally, you would say wise, thrice wise.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah. And is that term wise also sometimes used in the connotation in Arabic literature as great? Or would that be a stretch?
I mean, a wise man is great. Arabs view that as that. There's reverence for wisdom. So yeah, greatness too.
Okay.
Or it could be my personal, view of that. But I can see it both ways. I can see greatness being linked to wisdom, definitely.
the reason I say that is because it definitely translates as great in the Latin, and then subsequently from Latin to English, it would translate as great, with wisdom showing up earlier in the phrase, but not in that last thing. They always say this is, well, I'll just translate it.
Mhm.
So they say, sic mundus creatus est, hinc erunt adaptationes mirabiles quarum modus est hic, which means, in this way, or like this, the world is created.
Mm.
From this are many adaptations, or there are erunt. From this, many adaptations miraculous, or many miraculous evolutions, many miraculous application would be another way of saying that, because this is the way. And like they say very specifically, this is the way. Hic means this, est means is, modus means way or road or mode, like my modus operandi, right? Like the way that I operate every day. So modus, like the way, and quarum would be like, because this is the way, quarum. And then it says, itaque vocatus Hermes Trismegistus habens tres partes philosophiae totius mundi. And therefore, I am called the great like summum, great. Therefore, I am called the great Hermes Trismegistus, habens tres partes philosophiae totius mundi, having the three philosophical parts of the whole world.
Okay.
So this would also mean having the three. You could translate this, if you go back far enough in time, to be a philosopher was to be wise. So this could mean the three wisdoms of the whole world, but more traditionally we would say having all three parts of the philosophy of the whole world, or having the three parts of philosophy would be the better translation of the whole world. And then after that they add this phrase, which I didn't see anywhere in the Arabic, completum est quo dixi de operatione solis. Complete now is what I have said of the operation of the sun, or I have now finished what there is to say about the operation of the sun.
When I said thrice a while ago, it's actually, you can see it as triangle. That would be the word for triangle, meaning like three components to make a whole.
Oh, okay.
Like, so they're not separate things. They're the same thing, but from three different angles to make that whole philosophy or wisdom, you know?
Oh, okay. So if we wanted to get really loose into English, we can even say the triangular wisdom of the world, or something like that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And yeah, in Arabic, like for example, the days of the week post-Islam were numbers. So Sunday is Ahad, Wahid, you know, like we saw earlier. Monday is Ithnain, 2. Thursday is Thulatha. Wednesday is Arba'a. Thursday is Khamis. Jum'ah is Friday. And the Sept or Sabbath is Saturday. So the first 5 days are just numbers, you know, and they're more adaptable. Those words, those roots in Arabic. This is what I like the most about Arabic, that words can be very adapted to which plane of like explanation you're in, you know?
Much more poetic that way too.
Yeah. And by the way, when you read the Latin for على تكوين العالم الأكبر تكون العمل, which is what I said, I'm forming the mighty or great world, the work is formed. I think I get why they did this. They just switched the order, and if you do that, it can make more sense actually. Like it does also, like it's like a function of the second part,
right?
Meaning we have the work because of the greater miraculous or whatever adaptations of miracles, right?
Yeah,
This is the work for that. I can see it as a function and calling that variable if you want to be like techy about it.
sure. And
And mhm,
probably the way that you would read things would be as an entire phrase. So you wouldn't be literally translating maybe the way that we are. You would actually just read the whole phrase and contemplate it as a whole. So it doesn't
that's
matter
true.
whether the last comes first or the first comes last, unless you were scholastically breaking it down like we are.
Mm, true. Um, and speaking of, actually, when I finished reading the Arabic, when I studied the Arabic version, I studied the English version for a while, but then I looked at the Arabic version and I compared the two, which was very helpful for me.
Uh,
I remember when I was translating this, trying to interpret it later on, the the tablet itself is kind of recursive, meaning if you read it, you can take a step back and see your mind is reading it, the mind is reading it. So it also applies to you, you
yeah,
know? And that clarity came to me from the Arabic version, I think, because of, like I said before, where you see a linkage between them, like you see one thing that's being operated on, you know?
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, with the Latin version and then the subsequent English version that comes out of this, it's a little difficult to tell who is doing what and what is actually happening. It seems to me, based on your perspective and your translations that you've given us today, and also the written translation that you'd given me before, that it seems a little bit more straightforward, that it is all one work and that it's kind of progressive and that it's one thing, like the nouns and
Mm,
pronouns don't show up in quite the same way. We get a lot of pronouns showing up in the Latin, which is interesting because you don't actually need that in the Latin
mm,
in order to
mm,
make good sense, because
mm,
Latin is structured in such a way with its conjugations and the cases that you already know and you would already have that by context. And in fact, most of the best written work and poetry and other things like that doesn't have all of that same stuff. But then again, that would have been more like Roman Latin. Whereas by the time this was translated into Latin, this would have been considered like medieval Latin. And
mm,
there's some pretty big differences. I'm trained in classical Roman Latin. And so that's maybe where a lot of my persuasion comes from, in like they didn't actually need to put in these pronouns that made it seem so distinct and different, and also added this elusivity. um,
mm.
so yeah, just kind of fascinating. It's a really fun look to take a look at these two very different translations. And just for fun, let me
Yep.
let me go ahead and open this up and I'll show you Dennis William Houck's translation, which I've got here, which I think is really good, but it again deviates a little bit from the Latin for sure, and it deviates even more from the Arabic. So let me go ahead and share this, and we'll just take a look at this. So Dennis William Houck here, this is his translation. This is from the International Alchemy Guild, and also shows up in his books. He has a book called The Emerald Tablet, Keys to Personal Transformation, or something like that. The link to that will be down below in the description, as well as The Complete Idiot's Guide to Alchemy. Again, that link will show down below in the description. These are both really good books. He's a fantastic author, very entertaining, very informative. So I do suggest looking into these. But in this translation, he says, "In truth, without deceit, certain and most veritable." So again, this would be more in line with the Latin translation than it is with the uh, Arabic translation, because like we talked about in the Arabic translation, there were 3 ideas expressed in this first line. Here there are 4, and in Latin there are 4. But then he says, "That which is below corresponds to that which is above. That which is above corresponds to that which is below." Again, totally different from the Arabic where it came from or it originated from would be a better way of talking about that. In order to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. And just as all things have come from this one thing through the meditation of one mind, so do all created things originate from this one thing through transformation. So I like this in English because it is pretty clear. It takes some thinking about, because it's not straightforward. It's not just like a very easy sentence, but it is, if you just think about it for a minute, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. So all things come from unity, or one thing, through the meditation of one mind, or you could call that God, Allah, right? Unity, whatever you want, the universe. So do all created things originate from this one thing, again, God, unity, Allah, through transformation. And in the initial text, it says adaptatione, through adaptation, through evolution. So he takes some poetic license and calls it through transformation, which I don't think is an incorrect translation. I think that it's actually good and a proper word in the context of alchemy, but that's not the way that it shows up in either the Arabic or the Latin. Then it tells us its father is the sun, its mother the moon, the wind carries it in its belly, its nurse is the earth. And so far that's all pretty straightforward. That seemed to be really congruent from the Arabic to the Latin to the English. But then he says, it is the origin of all, the consecration of the universe. And again, universe never shows up anywhere in either of the translations of Latin or Arabic. Its inherent strength is perfected if it is turned into earth. That, again, that whole phrase is an interpretation. I don't necessarily agree with that translation or that interpretation, but that's the way he still translates it. Next says, separate the earth from the fire, which we do have that. The Arabic posed it differently, but in Latin, that's exactly what it says. Separabis terram ab ignes, separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, gently and with great ingenuity. So far with the Latin translation, he's spot on. That, again, as we recognize today, that's different in the Arabic. It rises from earth to heaven and descends again to earth, thereby combining within itself the powers of both the above and the below. I think that that's a great English translation for that. Although I have to say, now that I know it says the light of lights, I like that even better. Thus will you obtain the glory of the whole universe. Again, the Latin says mundi, the whole world. To say the whole universe is a macrocosmic stretch. I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's just a stretch. All obscurity will be clear to you, which isn't, it's also not wrong, but obscurity, technically the obscurity is fleeing, or the darkness is fleeing before the light in the actual translations that we see, both from Arabic as well as mostly in Latin, is like the darkness flees before it, would be the Latin translation. So this again takes some poetic license, but then it says this is the greatest force of all powers, where in Latin it says this is the strongest strength of strengths. And then it says because it overcomes every subtle thing, which, like we said, overcome was a good way of translating from the Arabic to modern English, and also even from the Latin. Overcomes or encompasses would be another way of saying that. And it penetrates every solid thing, so we're pretty congruent there. And in this way was the universe created. Again, Dennis chooses to use the term universe instead of world, where in both Arabic as well as in Latin, we see the term for world actually being, and if I remember right, we didn't see this phrase in the Arabic at all, the world being created. We didn't see that at all in there, did we?
Well, على تكوين العالم الأكبر تكون العمل could العالم الأكبر means the larger world. The second to last line. ألا تكون العالم الأكبر تكون العمل. I mean, this could refer to
The world.
the world. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so maybe it does make its way in there.
Yeah.
And from this comes many wondrous applications because this is the pattern. So Dennis is translating the Latin modus, where it says because this is the way. He's translating that because this is the pattern. And I actually like that better based on the context of how he teaches the Emerald Tablet broken down into 7 archetypal processes. The pattern is something that you can see present in all things as soon as you learn it. It becomes a way of understanding everything and the way that everything is constantly transforming. So I think that that's not a stretch at all. That's actually a good translation, especially for his particular application. Therefore am I called thrice greatest Hermes. Thrice greatest Hermes is a little bit of a stretch based on the Latin translation. It would be Hermes the thrice great, or Hermes, Trismegistus, using that Latin or that Greek word Trismegistus. That also works. 3 thrice wise, three wisdoms, things like that. Having all 3 parts of the wisdom of the whole universe. That's the way he translates that. And like we said, the Latin actually says having all 3 parts of the philosophy of the whole world. And again, here he says universe, and then he takes the term wisdom, which I like because that wisdom component is actually more accurate to the way that it would translate from the Arabic. Herein have I completely explained the operation of the sun. And we didn't see that phrase show up in the Arabic at all. That seems to be something that originated in the Latin version altogether.
Yeah. You know, in the last line, I didn't understand it when I read it in Arabic. And maybe I get it a little bit better now. But it starts with Fahada Fakhri, which is, so this here is my pride, as if I'm the father of this. So you could see where the operation of the sun could be applied here, right?
Okay, sure.
Maybe. And because we're talking about the world, talking about pride, just as a father would be proud of his son, that's very common here to use that phraseology.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Man, very, very fascinating. Now, from a laboratory perspective, let me just go ahead and pull up Hauck's stuff again here really fast. Share my screen, pull this up. All right, so we can break this down really easily. I have other videos on this. In fact, I have entire courses on this. I'm regular, if any of you come and study laboratory alchemy with me or have ever studied spiritual alchemy with me, you will know that this is one of the biggest things that I drive home. Like, you have to understand the Emerald Tablet and constantly refer back to it in order to be able to perform laboratory alchemy correctly, because without it, you don't have a context of how to actually perform the work. And it's true across everything that you're doing, everything from the spagyric tincture process to making a spagyric stone, to making alchemical stones, to the dry work, to the wet work, to every different pathway in alchemy. It all holographically and fractally follows these processes, not necessarily in order, but it has to follow these processes. So basically, these first parts within the European tradition, the reason they talk about these 4 things and break it into 4 different things is, again, because that corresponds to the 4 worlds of the Kabbalah. And so without that, you don't know whether it's true spiritually, causally, astrally, physically. when they spell it out like that, it corresponds to those four worlds. So now you know that this it's holographic and fractal pattern would be another way of saying that. And then that which is below corresponds to that which is above, that which is above corresponds to that which is below to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. So this is basically saying, what is the one thing that all created things having in common? Well, that's that they're created, that they are part of creation. So if we take away the one thing and just substitute that with creation, now it says everything that is macrocosmic corresponds to or originates from everything that is microcosmic for creation to exist. Now that's maybe an easier, more modern way of talking about that very same thing. And the reciprocal of that is true. So your internal environment, your microcosm, has an effect on the macrocosm. If you feel insecure, you will perceive insecurity outside of you. If you are secure, then you will perceive security outside of you. On the other hand, it is also true that if your physical environment is shaky, your macrocosm, that can cause your microcosm to feel a little shaky too. So if things are chaotic outside, they may be chaotic inside. That both of those are true. And within that dual perspective of macrocosm, microcosm is really where magic really begins to take place, where you are taking as much as you can your internal feelings and projecting them into the external, and then performing ritual in the external to program the internal. And that's where things are able to see eye to eye. So that's kind of a big part of it. And that's also a big part of alchemy too, is that as you're performing the work, which is like the ritual in the laboratory, then it has its effect internally on the understandings that take place in the changes that you see happen here, happen inside of you as well, on an emotional and mental level, which would be an astral level, on a binary level, which is working with sephirotic and qliphothic forces, on a physical level, meaning, you know, you're able to perform physical purification with the medicines and just like with understanding, and also on spiritual, it puts you back to that understanding of all things really originate from one thing. They all follow the same process. They all do these things. So says, just as all things have come from the one thing, or just as everything has come from creation, creator, Allah, God, however you want to call that, through the meditation of one mind, through God, Allah, creation, meditating upon itself, thinking into itself what all is possible. So do all things come from that one thing, through that force of creation, through transformation, which basically says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only change form. Energy is God, and God is constantly transforming. It has made you, it has made me, it has made the grass, it's made the herbs. It is everything, and not just made it, but it is that. That is perhaps the divine mystery of creation in and of itself. And the way that it sustains itself is through transformative process. So now it starts to tell us, what is that process? Its father is the sun. This deals with the archetype of fire and calcination in the laboratory. Calcination, pyrolysis, anything that works with direct heat. Then it tells us its mother is the moon, talking about the archetype of water, the archetype of dissolution in particular, dissolving one thing into another. Then it tells us the wind carries it in its belly, meaning that, and it's obviously talking about the element of the wind evaporates and it separates things. And so this is a process, an archetypal process of separation. In particular, this is going to look like filtration and or evaporation. And then its nurse is the earth, meaning it's fed or it's nourished by the earth. In the laboratory, in order to purify any salt material, you first need to calcine it down to an ash, dissolve it into purified distilled water, then filter it, and then evaporate it. And as you evaporate it, you start to see that crystals form. The purity of that first crystal that forms determines how pure the rest of it is going to crystallize, and the shape and the form that it's going to crystallize. So when you crystallize something for the first time, which is technically more of an evaporation than it is a crystallization, it's not very pure. But over time, it gets to be very pure, because then you can take a seed crystal and re-perform the process, take what you have just crystallized, crush it down, calcine it, dissolve it, filter it, evaporate it, and at the point where it begins to form a supersaturated solution, you take your seed crystal and you add it, and you form these extremely beautiful crystals. And it's that nurse giving that nutrition of that seed crystal to the solution that feeds it and allows it to grow strong. And in that way, it says, this is the origin of all, the consecration of the universe, but its inherent strength is perfected if it's turned into earth. To me, that phrase literally means the perfection of crystallization, making the most perfect crystalline aspect of that mineral corpus or metallic corpus that you possibly can. So this whole thing just works with the body and the purification of the body, or what in alchemy we refer to as the salt of a material. Then it tells us, separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, gently and with great ingenuity. This is the process of extraction, where you separate the sulfur, which is like fire, from the body of something, which is the earth. So you're separating the sulfur from the salt, or the fire from the earth, and that's a process of extraction. And there are multiple processes of extraction. You can ferment something in order to create an extraction of it. You can take purified alcohol or other solvents and put a body inside of there and extract it that way. Or you can also extract that through dry distillation. There are lots of different ways of going about this depending on the work at hand. But then it tells us it rises from earth to heaven and descends again to earth, thereby combining within itself the powers of both the above and the below. This is dealing very specifically with distillation, where you take something in a flask, you apply heat, the vapors rise, and now they're at heaven, the highest point of that distillation apparatus, and then they condense and they turn back to earth. So they start at earth, they go to heaven, they come back to earth. That's a process of distillation. And this deals with the purification of spirits. So whereas extraction deals with the soul of the material, the distillation deals with the spirit that you're working with, that you're purifying. And then it really doesn't tell you what to do with all those, but in this third rubric, which rubric is another term, I guess technically it's it is the third rubric. This tells us about the body, or the salt. This tells us about the sulfur. This part tells us about the spirit. And so now it's telling us that we have to combine those together because they've been separated and purified on their own. And now we put them together. And once you put them together, then it says, thus will you obtain the glory of the whole universe. All obscurity will be clear to you, meaning that darkness flees before this thing, because it's not just like, what do I do with this? You have all three parts put together and it's starting to form a new thing that is neither just individually any of those three parts, it's regrowing itself into something new. And this is the greatest force of all powers because it overcomes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing, meaning that this should be capable of either exalting whatever it is applied to, or if it's a stone, transmuting whatever it's applied to. In the case of the philosopher's stone, it will transmute lead into gold. In the case of an herbal stone, it will transmute herbs into a quintessence. So we can see that this is that phrase. And then it just basically sums it up. In this way, it was the way the universe or the world was created, meaning that everything is constantly calcining, dissolving, filtering and evaporating and crystallizing to its most peak physical form. And also on a mental and spiritual level, doing the same thing. It's constantly separating, constantly separating, constantly separating and putting it back together. And then even when that new thing is made, it's separating that and putting that back together and separating that and putting it back together. And so that's how the world is created. And that's what drives the natural evolution of all things, if you want to use these modern terms to understand it. And from this come many wondrous applications, because this is the pattern, basically saying you can apply this to anything in your life, whether it's a thought, whether it's an emotional thing that you're going through, whether it's something that you're doing in the laboratory, etc. Like you can apply this to any aspect of creation because all of creation is doing this. And therefore, am I called thrice greatest Hermes, who the Greeks actually, it was a pharaoh who wasn't actually named Hermes. It was a pharaoh of Egypt who the Greeks worshipped because they felt that he was the actual incarnation of their god Hermes, who was the mediator between heaven and earth, and therefore took the knowledge of the gods and instructed humans in all of these sciences. They say in Greek mythology that Hermes gave math and science and art and writing and music and all of these other aspects to human civilization from the gods in order to instruct them how to create civilization. And so they looked at this amazing Egyptian pharaoh as the third incarnation of Hermes on earth. So that's a Greek thing. That's a whole Greek mythology thing. It has nothing to do with actually Hermes writing this. But then herein have I completely explained the operation of the sun, basically meaning this is the way to transform or to exalt or to transmute any or all things. And especially this is the operation of the sun is talking about, this is the way of performing the red philosopher's stone. If you follow this translation and think about it with the materials that are to be used in the creation of the philosopher's stone, now you have everything that you need in order to be able to create it. So that would be the lab narrative of this emerald tablet in a nutshell.
That was great.
Cool, brother. Well, do you have anything else that you want to share, either about the Arabic translations or just the emerald tablet in general, or maybe how you've been able to take this wisdom and kind of apply it, or anything?
Yeah. I read the Idiot's Guide to Alchemy, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And there were some Arabic words in it.
Yeah.
Like a tenor, or I think, and elixir, or elixir, right?
Yeah.
This ka sound, I think that's what Jabir added to things, like kuhul.
Yeah.
I think there's a mystery there. I really, it feels like there's something there. So yeah, I wanted to pronounce some of them for the audience.
Please.
Yeah, other than those, tenor, elixir, there was another instrument. Maybe you know it, and I can.
Yeah, the alambic.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alambic.
Yeah. So thought that may be fun for people, but also, what happened to me personally was like in 2020 when Saudi locked down, I was just drawn to the stars. So I would just go up outside in the yard and just look up, and basically every single night was clear. I was working out outside and just, hanging out and doing some breath work. That evolved slowly into just waiting for the sun to rise, which was great because it kind of led me actually to Mark Savage's book, Between the Gates, which led me to the Emerald Tablet, which led me to the Arabic translation of the Emerald Tablet, which led to the email. And I think that was the beginning for me, like to see, like to be exposed to this stuff. Months later, I took a cultural anthropology class, and I wrote a paper about like my family altar before contacting you, I think, and it kind of really wrapped everything up for me because my heritage here, I'm from Khadis and from my father's side, and they're known for like looking at the stars.
Oh wow.
And when I felt lost the lockdown time, I just was drawn to the stars, you know. Um, Found out about Jabir bin Hayyan at that period and how Islamic alchemy was or sciences in Islam were
Yeah.
very important. And yeah, I mean that paper itself was transformative. Transformative. After I read the Idiot's Guide to Complete Idiot's Guide to Alchemy, I noticed that a lot of the operations were in that paper. Like it was very surprising, including the time of just sitting with it and seeing this, looking at the stars. And I think that would be maybe distillation. I'm not really sure. They weren't ordered either, but the more I was reading the book, I was like, wait, that happened in the paper, you know, which was very synchronistic for me too. I'm saying all of this because like this has been very beneficial for me. My life these days is really structured with the stars.
Yeah.
Try to wake up at dawn, start my day with the sunrise, my purification prayers in the morning, and my meditations and breath work. And really, truly, I feel much lighter, much more subtler, you know, and
Yeah.
happier and very excited about what I can serve people today. You know, it really did kind of, you know, quantumly change. Even my room feels a lot calmer, you know, and I just want to, I think we mentioned this a little bit, but like be co-creator with Allah, you
Yeah.
know, share love and happiness. And I think that's why in the beginning it was like, this is very important work. And I hope this helps people in the world, you know, because it helped me and I'm sure it helped you and it's helping everybody around me. And like, even if things are really bad, and sometimes they're very bad here, they don't really, I find ways to transmute them and transform them into something positive. I find ways to be in service because like there are kids here and like I feel for them a lot and like this gives me the power to just be loving and merciful with them, you know. And yeah, it's amazing, and I really hope that people would listen to this and just, you know, pick up that book. It's a great book. Read the Emerald Tablet for a couple of weeks. You know, just see what it triggers in them. You know, begin this journey because it's a wonderful journey. You
That's
know,
so
filled with
cool.
happiness. Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
You know, your experience is so similar to mine. And of course, you know, I think what is most powerful about this tablet historically is that regardless of the civilization that has held it and the cultural perception and filtration that they perceive it through, they're still able to apply the wisdom. So realistically, you know, the Egyptians, they would have looked at this as like the art of Pharaoh, who they looked at obviously as a god on earth. They, for the Greeks, the same thing, you know, looking at it as the emperor or as Hermes, which they venerated as a god who was also on earth. To somebody in the Arabic world, it would be, you know, filtered through the understanding of Allah, through the Christian world, through the understanding of God. And to, you know, if I may be so bold as to say, an infidel like myself, who really is, I can't say godless, but you know, I definitely have a very eclectic, I draw from so many different religions. I can't proclaim one particular religion or one particular spiritual path. So for somebody like me, it has the same effect on me though, where I'm able
yeah,
to apply this for the betterment of myself and the betterment of my society. And if nothing else, that brings us one step closer to our spiritual unity. And even though we
yes,
have all these great diversities, we can relate to our humanity and to our betterment as people through a work like this. And I think that that's really the beauty and the magic of this particular document.
yeah. And I would just close, I guess, with mentioning the recently also I designed a website and I plan to all of my alchemical, I guess, discoveries in it, really. That paper propelled me actually to write the website or to make it.
Yeah.
So that's going to be there. And now being armed with the operations, I could actually even, dissect it and see which operation happened when and how they kind of came all together and why this worked and how come did it work when I just asked. I didn't really like think my way through it. I just surrendered and accepted, the wisdom and the knowledge. I just accepted it and let it really work through me, you know. So the website is called Sacred Juniper, and I think it would be my honor if any of your listeners check it out and see where that takes them. You know, it will be ready by the end of the week, I think.
Cool. And that's at sacredjuniper.com.
Yep.
Yep. So the URL is already up. We'll include a link to this down below. By the time most of you guys are watching this, there's going to be a lot more content on there than there is at present. So you'll be able to see it probably as Ahmed is visualizing it right now. It will actually probably be there by the time you go to visit it, but we will include that link down below. And yeah, I hope this is the first of many conversations that we have, Ahmed, because it's been just so fun connecting with you and nerding out with you on language. It's been super cool.
Yeah, same. I really enjoyed it.
If any of the listeners would like to get a hold of you, is the best way to do it through your website?
Yes. For now, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect. So again, sacredjuniper.com. We have all of the links down in the description. Ahmed, once again, thank you so much for spending so much time. I know you're in a totally different part of the world. It's got to be very late where you're at, or very early, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited because it's gonna sunrise soon. I'm very excited about that within the next hour. So I'm very happy about that. This is a great way to start the day. Talking about the Emerald Tablet and then watching the sunrise turning from red to pink to orange to gold. That'd be a great way to start the day.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. It follows the processes here. Everybody who's listening, thank you so much for tuning in, joining in on this conversation with Ahmed and I. If you like this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell notification if you're watching on YouTube. Also, be sure to share this with your friends. Again, these are unpaid works that we offer to you because we think that they're so important for the world. So if you really enjoy this, the best way that you can pay this forward is to share it with other people that you know are going to think about these topics, and that these topics might end up changing their lives in ways that they have rung a bell or started to change or impact your own life. Alternatively, if you want to support my work here at the Phoenix Aurelius Research Academy, you can always purchase one of our Spagyrics. Probably the best way of supporting us is just to do a monthly auto subscription of our Spagyrics of the Month Club, where we send you 5 of the newest releases from our apothecary. Every single month, we make 5 new Spagyrics and release them, and the auto ship Spagyrics of the Month Club sends you all 5 of those each month that you subscribe. That's just $75 flat. That includes shipping, that includes all the Spagyrics, and the Spagyric, that's like a 70% discount over whether you're to buy them individually via retail. So it's a huge savings for you, and it just helps constantly support the research and other offerings that we offer, like this Alchemi-Culture podcast. So at any rate, blessings to you all, and blessings to you upon the sunrise, Ahmed. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Thanks. All right.
Bye-bye.